Not everyone who comes to Harvard walks through the front gates. Some arrive with flawless applications, perfect grades, polished essays, and glowing letters from professors whose names open doors. Others take shortcuts, gliding in on the rails of power, wealth, or family names that have rung like polished silver in high society for generations. But then, there are people like her. She came in silence, her footsteps muffled by the midnight halls. The towering gates on Harvard Yard were never hers to walk through. Instead, she slipped in through a side entrance, a narrow door most students never noticed, swiping her keycard under the cold blue light of a security scanner. In her hands, a mop, a bucket, a battered cleaning caddy. In her heart, a dream so old and neglected it had learned to sleep, buried under years of survival. Elena Brooks was not a student, not a celebrated prodigy gracing the pages of academic journals. She was a night janitor at Harvard University, a place where brilliance shone in every classroom, every library, every polished lecture hall, but never in the shadowed corridors where she worked. The professors didn't know her name. The students never saw her face. To them, she was just a shadow in the corner, an invisible part of the machinery that kept the university spotless. But Elena was far from ordinary, because while her hands scrubbed the marble floors, her eyes often lingered on the chalkboards left full of equations, and her mind, hungry, restless, began to solve them. The air was cool and heavy, smelling faintly of old wood, paper, and the metallic tang of lab equipment. Her sneakers made no sound on the polished floor, but the faint squeak of the mop echoed like a whisper in the cavernous space. Outside, winter pressed its face against the tall, arched windows, frosting the glass with delicate white veins. Elena paused for a moment, leaning on the handle of her mop. Her eyes drifted across the room, to the massive chalkboard at the front, its dark surface crammed with a forest of symbols, letters, and numbers. The ink of the day's lectures still clung to it in ghostly white strokes. Most people would see only the remnants of someone else's brilliance, but to Elena, the board was alive. She could almost hear the hum of ideas vibrating in the air, as if the room itself had stored the echo of the minds who had been there hours before. She set the mop aside. For a moment, her hand hovered in the air, hesitant, as though touching the chalk might shatter the spell. And then, almost without thinking, she reached out and traced one of the equations with her fingertip, feeling the soft grit of chalk against her skin. Her pulse quickened. She recognized the symbols. Not fully, not perfectly, but enough to know this was no ordinary classroom exercise. It was something rare, complex, alive. A part of her wanted to wipe the board clean, as she had been hired to do. Another part, the part that had stayed awake night after night for years, wanted to stay here, under this dim light, and keep tracing the lines until the puzzle began to speak to her. And deep inside, she wondered, if she solved it, would anyone believe her? Would anyone care? And so, Elena began. Not with words, but with symbols. Not to teach anyone, but to prove to herself that she still understood, that her mind was still alive. The fateful encounter. Meanwhile, in the parking lot behind the building, Professor Elijah Wren let out a weary sigh as he realized he had forgotten his research manuscript. A lecture he was preparing for the Cambridge conference. He hurried back to room 3.24. And that's when he saw her. A stranger, a woman with curly hair tucked under an old cap, standing at the chalkboard. She wasn't erasing. She was correcting the very equation he had left behind. Instead of scolding her, he read carefully, line by line, every mark she had made. The silence stretched. Then he spoke. "You've missed one small detail. The internal friction term in the secondary constraint I added yesterday." She stepped back, stammering an apology. "But," he continued, "aside from that, you are very close. Closer than any of my graduate students." That was the moment everything changed. When someone who had always been invisible was finally seen, the past revealed, and the first spark of hope. The next day, Elena stood outside the professor's office in the only neatly pressed outfit she owned, the same one she had worn to a job interview that no one ever called her back for. During their conversation, the past began to surface. She had once been the top student in her state, awarded a full scholarship to MIT. But when her mother was diagnosed with terminal cancer, she dropped out to work full-time. "I never gave up on math," she said softly. "It's just—" Life spoke louder. Professor Wren didn't say much. Instead, he handed her a slip of paper. On it, a single sentence was written. "If she still wants in, let her in." The exam of a lifetime. 1 month later, she would sit for the entrance exam to the Harvard Extension School, a test designed for those outside the system, but with enough will to step inside. No one promised it would be easy, but at least this time, she had a real chance. The journey through the dark from 6 p.m. to midnight. She was a janitor. From 12:01 onward, she was a student. 31 days until the entrance exam. Every day of Elena's life was split into 2 distinct heartbeats. From 6 p.m. to midnight, she scrubbed the long corridors where some of the brightest minds in the world had just walked out. From 12:01 a.m. until dawn, she quietly found an empty classroom, opened her notebook, and studied. No professors, no study groups. Just one woman, a pencil worn down to a stub, and pages of notes stacked like battle maps. Long nights and quiet light. During the first week, the security guards would still ask, curious, what she was doing there. By the second week, they no longer wondered. She had become a familiar part of the place, like the light bulb in the corner of the hallway or the faint clatter of keyboards echoing from some distant office. A student once passed by, glanced at her, and smirked. A janitor studying calculus? Cute. She didn't answer. She simply turned the page of her notebook and kept writing. The nights she fell, and the message she didn't expect. There were nights when everything felt pointless. Numbers tangled into chaos, theorems blurred into nothing. Her heart grew heavy, with exhaustion, with loneliness, with doubt gnawing at her from the inside. One such night, at 3 a.m., she slammed her palm against the desk in frustration. That's when her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. A hard problem isn't solved in a single night. But the strong don't quit halfway.
Just 2 initials, but enough for her to lift her head, reopen her book, and keep writing. The day of the exam, and the voice in her head. The exam room was on the 5th floor, a grand old chamber of polished wood, where golden light from stained glass windows fell like a cathedral of knowledge. Only 10 people had been admitted to sit for this round. 3 hours, no calculators, no notes, just a pencil, a blank notebook, and the raw mind you brought with you. The first question, a complex problem in combinatorial matrix theory. The third, a test of geometric intuition. The 8th, a question that didn't ask for a solution but for understanding. Why does this structure matter? Elena hesitated. Then came the old voice, the one that had haunted her before. Who do you think you are sitting here? And then another voice rose to meet it, her mother's voice. You have always been the brightest light in the room. She put her pencil to paper, not as someone who mops the floors, but as someone worthy of standing at the lectern. The first day as a student, and the eyes of doubt. No one held the door for her when she walked into her first class. No warm greetings, no ribbon-cutting ceremony for a janitor becoming a student. She sat in the back row, quiet, wrapped in the old knitted sweater her mother had made for her. Other students whispered, glancing at her as if she were an intruder.
One voice murmured, I thought only regular students could take this class. Who is she? No need to speak, just prove it. When the group assignment was given, she silently offered the most efficient solution, a recursive model so precise that even the professor paused in admiration. "Who did this part?" She raised her hand. No one laughed anymore. But no one yet believed she truly belonged here. She didn't blame them. Because she knew. Belonging isn't asked for. It's earned, line by line, step by step. He obstacle and the cruel silence. Among the students in the class, Jason, a neatly groomed young man in a blazer, always seated in the front row, seemed the most irritated by Elena's presence. Not because she had done anything wrong, but because she existed. When working in groups, he never listened to her. When she offered suggestions, he rolled his eyes and sighed. When she missed class due to an overnight shift, Jason told the group, "She's not serious." Just a PR stunt from Harvard. No one argued, no one defended her. But Elena didn't respond. She chose to answer in the only language she trusted, mathematics. A big opportunity, and a true test one rainy day. Professor Monroe, infamous for being uncompromising, posted a voluntary challenge problem on the class forum.
"Whoever solves this," he wrote, "will get a recommendation letter from me to any graduate program in the world." The problem was a variant of Ramsey's theorem, layered with temporal matrices and topological constraints, the kind of challenge no one had solved in the past 6 years. Most students closed the tab after reading it. Only Elena stayed. In Lamont Library, she bent over her notebook, writing, erasing, rewriting. 3 nights without sleep. She didn't use brute force. Instead, she rebuilt the problem from the ground up, searching for a pattern no one had considered before. At 2:46 a.m., when everything felt like an unscalable wall, she suddenly saw it, a way to fold time harmoniously between states, a technique even the professor himself had never conceived. She sent in her solution. No expectations, no hopes. The heavy accusation. The next morning, her phone buzzed. "It's Ren. Do you have a moment?" "What's wrong, Professor?" Jason filed a formal complaint with the board. He claimed she had plagiarized, that someone like her couldn't possibly have come up with that solution. Elena's heart sank to the pit of her stomach. "I have all my drafts, my handwritten notes, my version history." "I know," Ren said. "I've already sent them all to the board. And I believe you." For the first time, Elena trembled not out of fear, but out of anger. The verdict, and a professor's acknowledgement. A week later, the board's decision arrived. The solution is entirely original. No evidence of copying was found. The solver's name will be recorded on the honors board. Beneath it, the line read, "A. Thompson, 10:11 a.m., March 15th. No drums, no fireworks, and not a single word of apology from Jason. But when Professor Monroe met her after class, he handed her an envelope. "I don't write this kind of letter for many people. Don't waste it." She nodded, said nothing. But her fingers gripped the letter as if it were a ticket forward. Envy, and a line worth remembering. Outside the mathematics building, Jason blocked her path. "You still think you deserve to be here?" Elena quietly opened her notebook. The page was filled with her handwriting, diagrams, logic flows, recursive rules she had used to solve the problem. She held it up to his face. "Number, I don't think I deserve it." She met his eyes. "I know I've earned it." Then she walked away. Not hurried, not bitter.
Steady. Like someone who understood that other people's resistance is just another form of proof of success. Another letter, but not like the others. Amid the usual flood of emails, seminar invitations, class announcements, and reminders to pay the electricity bill, one message appeared quietly in Elena's inbox. Invitation to apply, Newton Hawking Fellowship. Recipient, Elena Brooks. Sender, Office of Dr. Margaret Sloan, Harvard Institute for Theoretical Mathematics. She held her breath. She had heard of this fellowship before. Everyone in the field had. It was the golden doorway, straight to a PhD, to working with the very best research teams in the world, to seeing your name printed in Nature or Science. The letter read, "We have reviewed your solution to the Ramsey problem. My research group needs people who can see what others overlook. Come meet me this Friday, 12 noon. The office of those who have everything." Dr. Chung's office was in the high-tier research wing, where sunlight streamed through a glass ceiling and danced across marble walls, where no hurried footsteps echoed, where professors called each other by first names and discussed the universe as casually as they discussed lunch. Dr. Chung, an elegant woman with neatly cropped silver hair, shook Alina's hand with a smile that seemed tailored to fit. "I don't need to ask why you're here," she said. "We've been watching you for some time. You do mathematics the way others write poetry." Alina blushed.
"But there is one condition." Her voice slowed. She knew instantly that the hardest part had arrived. The condition and the price of absolute focus. "This fellowship requires total commitment," Dr. Chung said. "You will move into the residential wing. You'll be provided with equipment, books, meals, housing. But no side jobs, no participation in groups outside the program, no tutoring, no social activities. We are not investing in the image of a struggle to success story. We are investing in a future researcher." Elena froze. She wasn't surprised, but it hurt, because this meant leaving behind the midnight mentorship group she had built, the place where outsiders found their voice. Stopping the late-night calls to her younger sister, who worked as a waitress and still believed her big sister was living proof that a janitor can make it to Westbridge. Cutting ties with the very version of herself that had carried her here, the one who studied in public libraries, wrote notes on cookie boxes, and survived on $2 coffee each day. The sleepless night. And the final question. That night, she didn't sleep. The invitation lay on her desk, the late lamplight making the paper gleam like gold. But inside her was a hollow space. She whispered, "If I leave everything behind, who am I then?" If success meant erasing her true self, was that still victory? The meeting, and the rejection that shook the room. 3 days later, she returned to Dr. Chung's office, right on time. White shirt, worn handbag, and in her hand, a single sheet of paper. "I came to say thank you," she began. Dr. Chung smiled. "Excellent. Then we can begin the paperwork." Elena shook her head. She placed the paper on the desk. It was an official letter of refusal. "I'm sorry. I'm not rejecting the opportunity. I'm rejecting the eraser." "The eraser?" "Yes, the thing that wants to wipe away where I once stood. I can't sign with a program that demands I stay silent about my past." The air went still. Dr. Chung's face shifted from surprise to cool detachment. "Do you know what you're turning down?" "I do," Elena replied. "And I know. I'll keep going, even without the fellowship, because my roots are in the ground, and the ground is where I grew." She walked out, lighter, freer, no glory, but with her faith intact. That night, she returned to her night class, midnight mentorship. 5 students were waiting for her, dark circles under their eyes, old hoodies, but each carried a notebook, a list of questions, and a fragile belief that they deserved to learn. Elena stepped in, smiling softly. "All right," she said. "Who here still thinks recursion is scary?" 5 hands shot up. She nodded. "Good. Then we're starting exactly where we need to start. A quiet email. An opportunity without announcement. No ceremony. No banners. No public recognition. Just an email from Professor Wren. Room 214, Thursday 3:00 p.m. Professor Liu is out unexpectedly. I've given them your name." No subject line, no explanation. Just one thing: trust. When Elena stood in front of the chalkboard in that old classroom, the very room she had once cleaned every night, her heart pounded. But this time, she wasn't there to wipe away the dust. She was there to teach. The first class, and an introduction. No unexpected students began to file in. A few recognized her. Someone whispered, "Isn't she that special scholarship case? I heard she used to be a janitor here." It didn't matter. She wrote 5 words on the board. What patterns do you miss? She didn't start with definitions. She didn't throw formulas at them. She told a story. When I was 16, I could solve any math problem, but I couldn't solve my own life. My mother got sick. I dropped out. I worked nights. I cleaned classrooms. But at night, I read. I learned from what others had thrown away. The room was silent. I was never expected to be here, but the most beautiful problems sometimes come from the people no one thinks will solve them. Then she began to teach, and for the first time, no one looked at her as the special case anymore. They looked at her as a teacher, from student to teacher, and from a single lesson to a promise. The promise. After class, one student lingered. It was Natalie, the girl who had been the first to ask to study with Elena. "I recorded your lecture. I hope that's okay." "Why did you do that?" "Because I've never seen anyone like me standing up there. Not until today." The video spreads, not from pity, but from truth. The recording of the class began to circulate quietly. It didn't go viral in a flashy way, but in a slow, steady ripple. From groups of underprivileged students in New Jersey, to a public library in Detroit, to a teacher in Alabama who played it in a special education class, a janitor teaching recursion like she's writing poetry. "I showed this to my daughter. She cried. Now she says she wants to go to college. This is why we must keep education free for those who've never been invited to the table." Elena never checked the view count. She didn't need to, because every time she walked into a classroom and saw a pair of eyes lift from the shadows, she knew one more person had begun to believe they could learn too. The final invitation, and a question from the heart. One Friday evening, another email arrived from Dean Howell, the department head. "We invite you to the new faculty reception, 6:00 p.m., Pierce Hall Courtyard, formal attire." Elena borrowed a black dress from Natalie. She tied her hair neatly and wore the scarf her mother had once knitted. At the reception, laughter floated in the air, glasses clinked, and the light was warm and golden. She stood at the edge. Dean Howell approached. "I've heard a lot about you. Remarkable. From mop to chalkboard, huh?" She smiled. But in her heart, she knew. They still saw her as a story, not as part of the system. Another professor asked, "So what now? Teach, then write a book? Or jump into some hot new AI startup?" She replied, "I haven't decided. But I don't just want to touch the light. I want to bring it to places that have never had lamps, a school in her mother's name, and a story that doesn't end at Harvard." A year later, with help from the community, from professors like Wren, from former students, and from hundreds of people who had once watched her teaching video, Elena founded a free school on the outskirts of Boston. Its name, the Brooks Learning House. Its motto, "No one is born knowing they deserve to learn, unless someone gives them the chance to believe it." The school accepted students from difficult backgrounds, children who had dropped out early, single mothers, immigrant workers, and those who had once been turned away for not having the right credentials. Her curriculum went beyond mathematics. It included courage, perseverance, and the ability to redefine yourself. When the light falls on the one who once mopped the floors, Elena Brooks, the woman who once slipped quietly into Harvard University with a mop and a long-forgotten dream, now sat in the most prestigious seat the institution had to offer, the president's chair. Not because she chased power, but because, for more than a decade, she never stopped opening doors for those who had once been turned away. The board's announcement of her appointment stunned the press, but not the students, faculty, or the community beyond Harvard's walls. To them, Elena had long been a leader of the heart, the first president who once was a janitor. At her inauguration, she didn't give a long speech. She simply stepped up to the lectern, opened an old stack of papers. The very first notes she had once scribbled on cookie boxes in her tiny apartment. She said, "I once thought this gate wasn't meant for me." But it turns out the gate never decides who gets to walk through. It is we, through effort, through faith, through the moments we refuse to give up, who turn the side door into the front entrance. She pledged to dedicate her presidency to waiving tuition for students from disadvantaged backgrounds, opening night programs for adults returning to education, integrating life skills and resilience into every field of study, restructuring the admissions process so that no one is turned away simply for lacking a polished resume. Not just a symbol, but a rebuilder of the system. Under Elena's leadership, Harvard was no longer just a university. It became a testing ground for a fairer future in American higher education, a place where effort truly held value. She didn't just keep the door open, she tore down the wall. And whenever someone asked, "Who is the president of this prestigious university?" they would hear the answer. She's the one who once mopped these halls and never stopped believing that the light should belong to everyone. Remember this. No one chooses where they begin. No one chooses the fate they are born into. But everyone can choose how far they will go, what they will hold on to, and who they will open the door for. Elena Brooks did not become a symbol because she was the best. She became a symbol because she never closed the door behind her. And in every corner of the chalkboard, in every late-night class, in every pair of eyes daring to raise a hand for the first time, a part of her still lives, like a lamp in the hallway, like warmth in the academic winter, like the quiet, unshakable belief that we deserve to learn without having to ask for permission.